Oh, no.
That's on the floor. That's on the floor.
I'll sit on your lap.
Okay.
Okay.
It's a friendly office.
Vince said he was an hour late, he wasn't
I got
gonna
hit in my
get
gas car.
in.
No, we said, no, Vince said we'd charge him trouble damages. $20.
$20, no, that's penalty.
Yeah, the fee plus treble damages.
Or no
That's
lunch
4 times.
$20 or no lunch tomorrow.
Oh, I probably won't run more than another 30, 45 minutes.
Let me turn the air conditioner back on.
You're the perfect person to sit there. Because she's freezing and we won't want to keep it out there.
Okay.
Say I warm up.
That's why her husband likes it.
It is kind of cold.
This is my left.
It was getting a little.
How about if we leave the door open then?
Yeah.
You think that'd
Wanna
be
do that?
okay?
That's
Yeah,
fine.
that way at least we'll get a little circulation. You're sick still, aren't you? Are you sick?
I'm not being
Bond with her.
Bond, man, I've already had it, I don't need any more bond.
We don't need any of that kind of bonding.
What are we going to do with this guy? We going to let him in?
Yeah.
So he has to bring his own chair,
No,
right?
no. He shouldn't be let in.
Because I was thinking,
Give him the
I'll sit
$5
next to
cash
him.
up
you
front.
sleep alone.
No, you know what? He'll give you a free ad.
Yeah, that was too
Joe, I told her, sit there, Joe sit up
He
front.
wants to.
Oh, Ray!
Do whatever is mine. Part of the day.
You just asked me a question, let me turn this music on. You asked me a question about hypnotizing somebody to do something. And yes, I can hypnotize anybody to do anything they want to do. Anything.
Even be on time.
Even be on time. But the key to that is want to.
Do you want to be on time or you just always want to be late?
I don't want to be hypnotized.
Can't do it. Can't do
We
it.
won't make it.
You'll undo everything that his mother's
We should
done.
do you. You're the leader, boss. You should do it first.
No, I can't.
If you would hypnotize him to be on time if he wanted to be, how long does it last?
Well, as long as he wants
Yeah.
it. As long as he wants it to. Could last forever.
Oh,
The problem with being on time, we'll talk more about personalities next week, is that there are some personalities that can't be on time no matter how hard they try. And what I'd have to do is, essentially, is I would have to break down some of those barriers in that personality type. Okay. And then overcome the problem. Because some people, my father, and I'll tell you more about this, my father could not be on time for love or money. He was 2 hours late for my wedding. He was one of the
it
witnesses.
was over.
No, we waited, because, see, in the Mormon church, I don't know if you know anything about Mormons, but we get married in a temple, and there's one in Los Angeles, one in Salt Lake, they're about 30 or 40 of them, I don't know, around the world. But we got married in the one in Salt Lake, and the witnesses go the day before and they sign the document that it's been done, and then they hold it there, and hope you say yes. And if it doesn't, then of course, then they destroy it. But that's the way they do things in Salt Lake. Salt Lake's weird. I mean, that's the government. I mean, the justice of the peace will do the same thing. Well, my dad went with the other witness down the day before and signed it, and then the next day, for the day of the wedding, we're kind of sitting there going, golly, should we get married or what?
Maybe he didn't like your bride.
Maybe that's it.
He's trying to tell you something.
Body language.
She outlasted him, you know, he's dead and she's still married to me, so. Anyway, my mom got there an hour after it was supposed to start, and I said, I'm glad you're here, Mom, but where's Dad? She said, well, he's out trying to park a car. See, in June, I mean, it's tough enough to find a parking place in downtown Salt Lake City anyway. But in June, when everybody's getting married around the temple, because they'll be performing in June, they might perform 20 ceremonies in a day in the temple, and so, you know, find a parking place for all those people and people that are going to the marriage and everybody else, almost impossible. My dad took another hour to find a place to park, so I gave him a bad time till the day died. Okay, now, did anybody match or marry anybody out there? You only had a couple of days.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, they all ate.
In the kitchen, this is a fact. Vincent Crucis was standing there with a cup of coffee like this. I put my hand in my pocket with a cup of coffee like this. Robert put his hand after I put mine in his pocket with his cup of coffee. The three of us were standing two against the sink and one against the wall. in this exact same position. Did you notice that? You noticed that was when I tried to show you that I was marrying you. But, yeah.
Did I tell you it's subconscious or what? They didn't even know it. Those other two guys didn't even know it. It's subconscious.
Well, I didn't mirror him. That's not the opposite. I matched him.
Well, was he standing kind of next to you?
Close. Yeah.
See, that's great. See, and it works.
I try to sway with you, but.
I sway.
Okay, it's swing it. Well, I usually fill with my keys and my change or something. But everybody has something they do. And if you can figure out what that one thing is, then you're better off than if you do nothing at all. But if you can do like several of those things we listed, like eye contact, eye blinking, breathing. Breathing is the best. Breathing is the absolute best because nobody's ever going to know it. Nobody will ever know that you're matching their breathing or trying. They're not going to know it, and they're not going to care because they don't know it. Now, sometimes people will notice. They'll notice you. You know, if you don't normally stand like this, and they're standing like this, their hands in their pocket, their shoulders down, they might notice. Or if you're not naturally supposed to cross your legs, if you're a lady and there's a guy and he goes like this and you go like that, he's gonna notice. No question about it. He won't know why you're doing it, but he's gonna like it. You might not be bonded yet, but you will be soon.
You have another house to sell, right?
And it really depends on what kind of message you want to give him.
Adelaide.
Do you want the listing?
You're guaranteed bonding.
That's right.
And bonding will get you your listing.
That's right. But how far will you go? How far will you go to get a listing?
And now we know how she gets those listings.
Out to Walnut. Yesterday she said she'll do whatever it takes.
Whatever it takes.
And today is all here.
And you know what? You know what? That's why she does a good job. That's why she's successful. You know what? I'm going to tell you this right now. I bet she has her limits.
It's called safe
Just like
listing.
everybody else does. Just like everybody else. If he said, let's go rob a bank together, and I'll give you the listing, you wouldn't do it. No.
What's my cut?
Okay, I don't know you well enough. Okay.
If I'm just gonna drive the car.
You can lose, in California, you can lose your driver's license for that. Did you know that? In a bank robbery? Whether you're involved in the robbery or not, if you're just driving a getaway car, they'll take your driver's license from you.
Big deal.
Not to mention.
Be careful. Yeah, it would be tough to sell real estate if you don't have a driver's license. Keep that in mind. I had an agent that worked for me when I bought this home office that didn't have a driver's license, didn't have a car. How do you do that? I mean, it didn't last very long, of course, because you have to have a car. Come on. Okay, matching and marrying. Keep in mind with your matching and marrying that first off, that don't do something that's unnatural. Don't cross your legs improperly, ladies. Don't pick your nose, guys. If you're driving down the road and somebody flips you off, don't flip them off.
Especially around here.
Yeah, because they might shoot you. Okay? Don't do things that are unnatural. You might get shot. Okay? Do things that are natural, and do them often, and practice them. This is something that happens all the time, and everybody you meet, you can think about it just a little bit. Just think about it a little bit. And in fact, if you'll do this, if you'll just practice one thing with each person you meet, pretty soon it'll all become subconscious to you, and you will have that natural charisma that we talked about with JFK and Ronald Reagan and so many other people have had. You'll have it because it will be bred into you. And you know what happens is it goes on to your offspring. They get it from you because they see and they learn by seeing. Okay, so you can pass it on. It's a great characteristic to be able to pass on, and you can pass it on to your wife. Now, I'll tell you a story about my wife. When I first started doing this, she didn't know what I was doing. Okay, she didn't know anything about it, and I could bond with her real easy. I mean, I could just, boy, hey, 15 minutes, and I was right into her subconscious. I could get her to do anything I wanted. Okay, of course we were married. But after she learned these same principles, let me tell you something, it's just a little bit harder with her now. Because she looks at me, I mean, if we're just watching TV or sitting around talking, then it's usually okay. But if we're having a discussion about something that's really important, and I'm going, well, this is real important, so I've got to overcome it. Somehow I've got to bond with her, I've got to get into her subconscious. And so this superficial stuff's not going to work, I've got to get in. And I'll start doing whatever she's doing. She's sitting like this or across her legs or whatever, and I do it the same way. She'll look at me and she'll say, knock it off, Ken.
Does it matter what time you start doing it?
Very good.
Do it anytime you want. You mean time of day or time in the
No,
relationship?
time and
or
yeah, like if it's listening right away or.
Anytime, anytime. When one of the things, my wife really hates salespeople. I don't know if, I don't see anybody like that here, but my wife, especially car salespeople, she likes people who are like her. And she is kind of a calm, easygoing person, but she can be riled. But she would never wear white shoes and a white belt, you know, kind of car salesman kind of attitude, clothing. She wouldn't do it. When we buy a car, I buy it. She won't even go down to the dealership. I can't tell you how many cars we bought. I bought probably the last 7 or 8 new cars we bought. I purchased, and she won't even go because she hates salesmen. She just absolutely hates them. And the reason is because they come off differently than her. So if you can learn this characteristic, if you can learn to bond with people, you can even be able to sell to my wife, believe it or not. And I can't do that sometimes. And there are some people out there who are like that. And you just have to be very careful with that. You're not going to get everybody with everything you do. I can remember when we bought a Toyota Supra a few years ago. And we walked into the dealership and the salesman walked up and he, hi, how you doing? He tried to shake my hand and I'm going, oh, okay, great, gosh, I mean, this guy was crazy. And then he shook my hand again, and pretty soon he shook my hand again. And knock it off, mister. You know, I mean, pretty obnoxious, right? And then he says, oh yeah, and we got this great color over here, and you know, and he's talking really fast, and slow down. I'm just here to buy a car, I'm not here to listen to your song and dance. Yeah, but I didn't care about his excitement. He was supposed to get me excited, but by him being excited did not necessarily get me excited. What it did was it really made my wife mad, and that was the last car she went with me to buy. And we didn't buy it from him, by the way, we bought it from somebody else. We bought it from somebody else who was what, more like me. Because my wife could even get along with that guy. Okay. And she's pretty tough to please, so be careful what you do. Now there is one more thing that I need to bring up on this subject, and that is, some people say, well now isn't this manipulation? Now how many of you have been thinking that? Has anybody thought that in here? Good. There has to be one. Okay, I was going to say, good, there's nobody. There has to be one in every crowd. Now I'll tell you why. Because they think that if you're subconsciously manipulating somebody, you're doing something evil. Is that right? Did you think that far through?
If you're doing it subconsciously, I don't think it's manipulative, although it probably could be just as manipulative.
That's right.
Or evil.
But it just seems a little bit on the phony side to me, but I can understand, like if you're with a group of businessmen and they take their jackets off, you take your jacket, you know, things like that. It makes sense because it just puts them at ease.
Right. In fact, don't we all do it every day when we're at home? We all stand in front of a mirror, we fix our hair, we brush our teeth, we take a shower or a bath. You don't? I'm sorry.
No.
Oh, your hair! Oh. Well, but don't we do that? Don't each one of us, women put on makeup, they put on lipstick, and they you know, we all do it. And why? Is it to make us feel better? Well, partly, of course. But part of making us feel better is by making other people think that we look great, so they'll tell us. And so they say, you look great, and you go, yeah, and I feel better.
I'm happy if I don't
We
scare
manipulate people every day of our lives. Okay, each one of us, in every day of our lives, will manipulate somebody. So let's do it so that they like you, and so that they trust you. Okay, let's do it the right way instead of incorrect.
You say manipulate, I say guide.
Guide.
Oh,
It's
lead.
guide. I like that. It's guide. Okay,
But
so do that.
manipulate isn't necessarily a negative
Right.
That's right.
But the word manipulate sounds
to
negative.
you.
To me.
Yeah, so we will never
Like guide
use,
gently.
we will never use manipulate around her again, we will use
Do
God.
whatever, that way I don't care.
Okay. Okay, what we're gonna talk about now for the next about 20 minutes is perseverance. And let me tell you about perseverance. There is a real difference between those who succeed and those who don't succeed. And the reason is, well, there are several reasons, but one of the reasons is perseverance. If you will learn the difference between persistence and perseverance, then I think you have the key. I'm going to tell you 4 stories that will demonstrate this. The first one is about Tina Turner. How many know anything about Tina Turner, her story? She was a singer with Ike, her husband. Ike and Tina Turner, remember? A few years back. And they sang, they did real well. I mean, whether you like her music or not, doesn't matter. But they did real well. They made a lot of money. And they went on tour time after time after time. They were on tour in Europe. And Ike had become so into drugs and alcohol that one day he couldn't go on stage. I think they were in Spain. And he couldn't go on stage. And Tina said, hey, look, I don't know about you, Ike, but I'm in this, I made a commitment, I'm going on stage. And she went on stage and performed all alone without him. She left the stage that day after the show, took the small amount of change, about $1.58 or something like that as the story goes, and I think it was a Shell credit card. And she left and went back to America. And for 8 years, she didn't do anything except sing in nightclubs and bars. She couldn't get a job. She couldn't get anybody to even return her phone calls to cut a record, because she had left the tour. Those people who had financed the tour were mad at her because they'd spent all this money on this tour, and they weren't going to put up with it, and they were not going to let her back in the business, and she was out on her air. And she could get little nightclub jobs, and that was about it. She could live barely, but that was about it. And then after 8 years of living hell, after being a star anyway, I mean, singing in nightclubs might be great, but after you've been a superstar, it's pretty tough. After 8 years, one of the producers she'd been trying to get a hold of finally called her back. She cut the Private Dancer album, remember that? And she sold 8 million copies. 8 million in 1 year. But she had to pay for 8 years for whatever the industry thought that was, an indiscretion, a sin, a mistake, or whatever it was. She had to pay for 8 years. I'm going to tell you another story. Well, let me talk to you about Abraham Lincoln. How many of you remember what Abraham Lincoln did? Everybody knows, right? And why? Everybody remembers Abraham Lincoln because he lasted through trials and tribulations. Abe Lincoln, remember, was born poor, grew up without hardly anything. He ran for public office. How many times did he run for public office? Anybody know? 11 times. How many times did Abraham Lincoln win? 2. He was in the House of Representatives and he was the President of the United States, and that's it. Out of 11 elections. And he's one of the greatest presidents we've ever seen, ever known, and will be forever. We will remember him for the things he did. He even had a nervous breakdown along the way, but he kept going towards his goal. Tell you a story about a real estate developer in Salt Lake City. This guy was the envy of every real estate developer that I knew. I had a small development company and a brokerage, and I thought, boy, if I could be just like him. We're going to be in the big bucks and all that, you know. How many of you have looked at somebody and thought, gosh, if I could be just like them, I'd be happy? Anybody? Well, that's what I thought about him. And that's what all the other developers, I think, thought about him, too. He had a land development company. He had a mortgage company. He owned a bank of his own. I mean, we're talking FDIC. He had a real estate construction company and development firm, and managed commercial real estate. I mean, he didn't do all this. Of course, he had people who did it for him. This guy was one of the big guys. He was one of the fat cats. He was born rich. He was good looking and naturally charismatic, like you've learned to be today. Well, he was born with it. He had everything. He had everything. Money, power, everything. And then in 1979, the economy started getting ugly in Utah. And no big deal, because he was smart. He knew the financial system of America inside and out, and he had been through recession after recession. It was no big deal. And so he knew how to handle it. Well, the problem was, this was the longest recession in the history of the United States. In fact, Up until just a couple of years ago, it was still going. Utah's economy was, it's yours.
It's the only one that sounds like this.
Real estate was in a depression, not just a recession in the state of Utah, Idaho, Wyoming, and most of Colorado. This was a depression where values were falling faster than people could buy the homes. They had, out of the FHA office in Salt Lake City, they had 14,000 foreclosures one year and 21,000 the next. And when you're talking a population base of 4 to 5 million people, that's a lot of homes. It's a lot of homes. And boy, I'll tell you, we made good money selling those foreclosures to young people who just get married, because we got the full 6%. Well, anyway, this is the kind of thing that this man had to go through. One day he said, I've got a plan. And he went to Japan and he got a bunch of investors to invest in his company. And right before they paid the money, they backed out. I mean, it was so close. It didn't happen. And he says, I got to do something. Everything's going down the toilet and it's not happening. What am I going to do? And I don't know if it was his idea or his attorney's, but his attorney didn't go to jail. So, who knows? What he started doing was he had this condo project in a resort town in northern Utah. And he started selling timeshare. You know what timesharing is? Well, he didn't just sell timesharing. He sold timesharing upon timesharing. So he had one unit for a peak week. You know what a peak week is. He had this one unit. He'd sell it 3, 4, 5, 10 times. Pretty soon, it wasn't just enough to sell a few that way, but buyers were coming in and they were still buying things. But the things they wanted to buy were already sold, so it didn't matter that they sold again. And again, and again, and again. It happened thousands of times. And it got to a point where, I mean, you can do this for a while in a timeshare project, because people will come to your timeshare project and they'll want to stay, you know, they're week. And you just say, as a hotel manager, you just say, oh, I'm sorry, your unit is booked up and this week we rented it out so you get this other unit. And people who do timesharing don't care. People who buy those units, they don't care, they don't know. It doesn't matter to them, because they get their week and they're happy, they get their vacation. Well, so you can do it for a while, but pretty soon it got to a point where he'd done it too long and too far. And it caught up with him, people started finding out. And he denied it, of course. No, that's not true, we didn't do that. And eventually, it ate up his entire company, buying those people off, saying, no, we didn't do it to your seat, you're the only owner. They buy it. It'd take money from his finance company or his mortgage company or his bank or from the commercial company or something. And eventually it drained every one of those resources until he was exposed as a fraud. And last year, and I don't know if he was still this year, but last year he was still in federal prison under fraud charges. Convicted, gone to jail. What did he lose? Not just his job, not just his house. He had a nice. And when I say $450,000 house in Utah, it was a nice $450,000 house. We're talking something that would go for about $1 million around here. Nice home. Everything. I don't know if he's still married or not. Wonderful family. I don't know. But he went to prison. He was in Arizona. And that was 10 years at least that he was in prison. Golfer's prison, but prison nonetheless. Okay. Okay, that's... I hope I didn't say his name through that whole thing. A great guy, but he was just pushed too far. He got to a point where he didn't have any other options. And so he changed. Okay, the next story is about a couple of guys who went to med school. They grew up, they were small, when I grow up I'm going to be a doctor. How many of you wanted to be a doctor when you were a kid? Good, because I have a problem with doctors. Okay, how many of you wanted to be a realtor when you grew up? Nobody knew what realtors were when you were a little kid.
Yes, I did.
Did you? Your mom was one. Your dad.
I have other reasons.
Okay. Anyway, they wanted to be a doctor, and they both grew up together, and one of them was relatively rich, and the other was relatively poor. But they were best friends, and as they grew up, they got older, and they both did pretty well in high school, but they went on to college, and Bob, we'll call the one, did real well, got a scholarship, did real well. The other one, we'll call him George, didn't get a scholarship because he was working all the time, because he didn't have any money. So he had to finance his own education. And as he went through school, he still wanted to be a doctor. I mean, we want to be doctors and we want to practice together, right? George and Bob went through their undergraduate work, they graduated, And Bob went on to med school. George couldn't. Now, how many of you know somebody who wanted to be a doctor once, but couldn't be because they couldn't get the education? Lots of us do. Well, George wouldn't quit. He couldn't go to med school, but he couldn't quit either. So he found a med school somewhere outside the country, and he went to med school outside the country. A lot cheaper, a lot cheaper. And he still got his degree or his doctorate, and he still got it. And he came back to America. He's a member of the American Medical Association, and he practices with who? Bob, his friend. They're practicing today. Success. Well, what is the difference between the way he did it and the way the real estate developer did it? There's a little difference, isn't there? They both changed their tactics a little bit. You know, when it comes to keeping going and keeping up and keeping doing the things that you know you should be doing to reach your goal, you get to a point where you've just had all the fun you can stand. And everybody does that. You get to a point where, gosh, you just want to sit down and say, gosh, darling, to your wife, I can't take it anymore. I just want to watch TV tonight. I don't want to go out on this listening presentation because they're going to listen to somebody else because I'm ugly.
Shower, get out. Hit the door.
Some of us need a wife that will say that, don't we? Or a husband. Well, it doesn't matter if you're ugly. I've seen some of the ugliest people in the world are the most successful. Sam Walton's not a pretty guy. But he has a lot of dough. Okay? Now, what's the difference between Sam Walton and us? What's the difference between George in the story? I hate the word story because it really is true. Between the story of George and the story of Tina Turner. Well, Tina Turner, let's analyze Tina Turner. Tina Turner paid her dues. She just kept on going and going and going until finally, 8 years later, she sold 8 million copies. But she didn't really change her tactics too much. She kept calling producers and calling and calling and calling. She didn't really have to. But what about the story about George? Somehow he had to change his tactics a little bit, didn't he? Because he couldn't get in med school. There's no way he could. In the United States, he wanted to, but he couldn't. But he changed his tactics. Now, what about this real estate developer? What about him? Now, he changed his tactics too, didn't he? He had kind of a problem with the way he did it, though, didn't he? Now, what's the difference between George and the developer? George maintained his integrity.
One was legal and fair, and the other one wasn't.
That's right. And the developer was not. He was formerly very active in his church and civic affairs. He became inactive in those and lost his own integrity. He changed his value system. But I'm not going to tell you what your value systems need to be. I'm not going to tell you how to be honest or how to be dishonest or where to draw the line or those things. You have to make those decisions on your own. But when you draw that line, that's your line. And make sure that you live up to that line. Because what's going to happen is you're going to be like this developer. You're going to be maybe not in prison, but you're going to lose something. Psychologically, subconsciously, you lose something when you quit. Who was it that said never, never, never quit? Winston Churchill. No?
Time. Before you were in the Civil War, right?
We knew that. Now, why did he say that? Because they'd been fighting the Germans time after month after month after year, and boy, they wanted to, but they couldn't give up their freedoms. Never quit. Well, this developer didn't quit, did he? Boy, he just thought of a new plan. Well, the difference between perspective, Don Quixote style, you know, the man of La Mancha who's tilting at windmills, remember the story? He goes around thinking they're the enemy and he's fighting them with a sword. The difference between persistence and perseverance is being able to change and maintain your integrity. If you have to change your tactics, change them but maintain your integrity. Don't do something that is against your line that you drew for yourself. Now, George changed, and he didn't breach his integrity. He didn't cross the line. Okay? He kept on going, and he's a doctor today, and he practices and makes a lot of money. He does a good job, helped a lot of people. And you guys can do the same thing, but you have to keep on going. When it gets tough, and I know it gets tough, really gets tough. But you know what? There's the sale. There's the listing. There's your goal. And it's in sight, and whatever that goal is, whether it's money or happiness or whatever it is, and we're going to find out in the fourth lecture, keep on going towards that goal. I remember when I was a lifeguard, when I was in junior high school, we were taught to be lifeguards in the Boy Scouts. And they taught us that we should jump in the water instead of dive in. Oh yeah, I couldn't understand that, because I could get a lot farther and a lot faster if I dove in. Don't you think? I mean, isn't that logical? Well, the reason they want us to jump in feet first was because if there's somebody out there and we're trying to save them, and we're in a river or in a lake, and they go down or they're washed off somewhere, and your head's underwater and you come up and go, where are they? But if your head's above water, if you jump in, your head's above water, you can always see where they went down, you can go to that point. Or you can see them being washed away. Well, that's where your goal, that's the way you need to approach your goals. You need to jump in, not dive in, but jump in and keep those goals in your mind. Keep them in, keep those inside. So you can see those goals so that you can reach what you really want. And if you have to, you're swimming this way, but your head's above water, and your goal goes this way, you can change your tactics just a little bit like George did, and swim that way. And if it goes a little bit farther, you can change a little bit more and go that way. And keep going to that goal and reaching that goal. Now each one of us, we're going to talk about goals in another session, but as those goals change, or they are magnified, they can become closer, sometimes they scare some of us. The first time I saved somebody's life, I was scared to death. I got right up there and I'm going, well, what if they start beating me up like they taught us they would, you know, because when people are floundering in the water, they might smack you. And I was really scared. I mean, I was right there by my goal. I was gonna, you know, and whoa, I was really scared. Well, don't let that worry you, because that's natural. When you get towards your goals, you set another goal beyond it. And keep your eye on that goal so that you can reach that goal. Persevere. Okay. Maintain your integrity. Now, remember Winston Churchill said never, never quit. What I'm saying is keep going, do whatever it takes to do, maintaining your integrity. Whatever that line is, maintain it. Any questions about perseverance? Any about bonding?
You know, with you setting goals, like as far as you having a goal topic, coming to that topic prepared with goals or making goals from that topic, is that?
We're going to talk about some of the goals that interrelate with the real estate office, but we're not going to talk about personal goals too much on that day. And I think you and I would like to talk about goals, and then they can think about their goals the way we design the class. That's what I'd like to do. Because their goals may be a little bit different than the way you and I see them. But the way you see them is for the best for the office, and what they see is the best for themselves.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
But I don't want them to think any more than they already do, and I hope you all have goals. But I hope that when you formulate your goals that you work on, that they fall in line with Vince. Does that help?
Yeah. Yeah, meaning more than just the office, right?
Yeah. Okay. Anything else? Any questions at all about bonding?
Minor question. When you walk in to your listing presentation and they